If we're going to ask people in this state, in this country, to get outside their comfort zones, which is ultimately what we're asking when we're encouraging behavior change, I'm going to ask you, if you'll oblige me, to get out of your comfort zone for a minute. As messengers, which you all are, as communicators, which you all are, we need to be ready to communicate, because sometimes nerves come at us, sometimes poorly prepared talking points come at us, sometimes big spotlights come at us, sometimes the deniers come at us, and if our body and mouth and mind is not ready to go, we will fail or fall in the process. So, if you'll oblige me, if everyone could stand. Someone just like, I knew we had.
Hey, why don't you chair?
Paul, it's okay.
Okay.
There's plenty of chairs.
Welcome.
Like plastic bags.
Welcome. Nice to see you. Yeah, nice to see you. Okay, so we're going to do a warm-up of our body, because as runners, skiers, hikers, any of that, you warm up your body before that. So before speaking, you want to warm up. Before any kind of speaking. And if you don't have a space, you're like, where do I warm up? I've warmed up in bathrooms, in some of these bathrooms here, in some of the hotel rooms here, in showers. You can warm up anywhere. You can warm up walking from your car to the building. Warm up, warm up, warm up. Especially if you've got some multisyllabic delivery, because you're talking about anthropogenic something. Definitely want to warm up these. So the first one is feet shoulder width apart. I'm bouncing just because I just want to bounce the stress out a little bit. We hold stress in different parts of our bodies. Some of you in your neck, face, shoulders, hips, etc. So I'm just bouncing it out. Then I want to focus on my breath. I want to take nice, big, deep breaths from my belly, not from my chest or my throat, my belly. So it means expanding. Again, you might feel self-conscious. I'm going to expand my big belly for all of you right now. Just a nice... So take a nice big breath. Okay, good. Knees are bent, circulation's going. This is where your breath comes from. If you ever prepare for a talk and instead talk up here, this is going to go. Do you have a comment to make?
No, I'm just stretching.
Oh, you're stretching. That's awesome. Way to stretch. That was great. Looked like a hand raise, but it was a good. I support the stretch. Okay, so we're going to begin with a wow or a zoo down in this space. We're going to get low in the earth with that. So big breath. Massage this cartilage as we speak through our rib cage too. So you're gonna be like, Anyone who knows martial arts knows that you can kill someone in their sternum. Similarly with the voice, I'm not going to hurt you. Similarly with the voice, you can provide a lot of power from this space here, and I'll just show you how it goes. Make sure you get a big breath before you do it. If you don't, it'll stress your voice. Go! Go! See, I can just punch. Why is the punch important as a speaker, as a communicator, for those who were in the previous session? Why is the punch important?
Surprise.
Good. Surprise is good. Diversity is good. If I've got a long monotone sentence and I'm doing this, if I want to wake people up, this is what I do. Now maybe that was too much. Okay, bring it back a little bit, Michael. But you'll see good communicators diversifying their forms of communication. Okay, so feet shoulder width apart, bounce, find a point in front of you. Big breath. We're going to do a go. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Go! Good. 1, 2, 3. Go! Good. Now, I'm going to ask you to do something. Feels a little silly. A lot of us hold tension here. We're going to shake out the tension in our jaw the following way. The less obnoxious way, you just massage your jaw, or you can take it and just hold it. Imagine there's a string in the middle of your tongue. The tip of your tongue is going to be positioned behind your teeth here. I have to communicate this clearly since not only you can see me. but I'm going to pull the middle of my tongue out in the following way. I've got to strain the middle of my tongue, tip the tongue behind the bottom of the teeth. So why is that important?
It looks fun.
Decarbonization, carbon neutrality, net zero. We get tripped up on our tongue because we're nervous or whatever. We lose the audience in that moment. Previous workshop we talked about when someone trips up on their words, the reading of speech, what happens? For those of you who are in the workshop, shout it out. Lack of confidence in the communicator. And in these issues, we need to build faith and confidence in our audience. And if we fail to warm this up, we do a major disservice to the audience that we're trying to serve. Okay? So, repeat after me. Whether the weather be cold, or whether the weather be hot, we'll be together whatever the weather, whether we like it or not. Okay, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to speed us up. I want you to enunciate very clearly. It's written in alliterative fashion. Okay, ready? Whether the weather be cold, or whether the weather be hot, we'll be together whatever the weather, whether we like it or not. Whether the weather be cold, or whether the weather be hot, we'll be together whatever the weather, whether we like it or not. Good. Yeah. So, pick your own. I've got a bunch of tongue twisters you can warm up with. You can do a peachy, you can do a big face, small face, any of that to warm up this. Two more. We're going to do a me, may, ma. This is helpful if you've got a cold or if you've got sinus stuff. That's never an excuse. I've had coaches in the past who are like, oh, you've got a cold? Yeah, that's not going to prevent you from doing the following keynoting, etc. And this is how you work through the stuffiness of this. Again, I'm always shoulder width apart, big breath. With me, big breath. One more time. Good. So I'm not stuffed now, but if I was, I would do that until I sneezed through it. Not in front of you, but I would do that in my room or in the shower or something so that it clears up. I'm serious about this. If you're ever stuffy and you have to give a talk, open that up, and that's one way to do it. I just vibrate into my nose until my nose is like, oh, enough, and then it starts sneezing, and then I'm clear. Sorry, too graphic, maybe. The last one is a re that's going to shoot through the top of my head and then come down through my whole body, touching on the points that hopefully I've warmed up with you so far. It's going to sound like this. Again, big breath. When you go, I got a break there for men, sorry. Okay, something like that. Your whole system. We're talking through our whole entire system. We're not just talking from our mouth. We're talking from our head, we're talking from our chest, we're talking from our belly. And eventually, if we had time for all of you to lie down, we can talk through our hips and legs and feet too. There is that process, but we won't get into that. Okay, ready? Big breath. Good. One more time. Big breath. Falling down. Good. Thank you. This better. Okay, so what are you going to do next time you have a talk in front of one or more people? Please do, bless you. For example, had Moreau, how could we have improved his presentation? I'm saying this lovingly, I'm a big fan of what he announced, but let's use this as practice. In terms of presenting in front of you, you're the choir, but what if it wouldn't have been the choir, and he's got 5 minutes with the non-choir? Maybe some of you aren't the choir, I don't want to presume. Yeah?
Too many words.
Okay, so slowing it down, make it more simple. What else?
Don't read
Don't read the speech, thank you. And I've worked for principals before who have read speeches, so I'm very sympathetic to the comms people from his office if they're still here. Yeah.
I'd appreciate it sounding more like a man and less like a teenager.
Okay. That goes deeper than I'm really willing to go in this keynote, but okay. We're going to talk to you afterwards.
Don't be handcuffed to the podium.
Great. Yes. What is the podium? Don't be handcuffed to the podium. So my father was a preacher. I grew up in the Amish Mennonite Church, and so I grew up watching preachers all the time. What do I hate about podiums?
You have to stay put.
Well, you have to potentially stay put, but what somebody said over here, it's a barrier. If I want to communicate with you, I have to get rid of all barriers possible, and ideally, I want to mix it up so you don't fall asleep looking at the podium. You're like, uh-oh, where did he go? Now Michael's back here, because I'm changing what you're used to, hopefully, to give you a new experience that wouldn't be here if, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So today we're going to talk about Vermont attitude. Yeah. So remove all barriers between you and the audience. All barriers. And be thinking about, hi. Oh, wow. That's awesome. Thank you. What's your name? Bill. Michael. Nice to meet you. So thinking about how we can make these connections with everyone in the room so that they feel like they were in conversation with me. All right, so let's jump in. Vermont attitudes. Good news. Estimated percentage of adults who think global warming is happening in the majority. So I'm using here Yale data, Yale Center for Climate Change Communication. They partner with George Mason's Center for Climate Change Communication. The Yale Project on Climate Communication is excellent. They have great data. If you've not used it, please use it. Good news in Vermont, majorities, if you can't see the colors, in the overwhelming majorities, climate change is happening. This is verified by Energy Independent Vermont. Check. We've got attitudes here in our favor. Next one. Fossil fuel companies, we should tax them. Majorities, attitudinally, in our favor, check. That's verified by Energy Independent Vermont. Support a carbon pollution tax, check. Next one. Support regulating CO2 as a pollutant. Majorities, you can't see the colors. They're in the overwhelming majorities. Deep red here. Again, verified by Energy Independent Vermont. In terms of regulating GHGs, CO2, etc. And majorities, again, support renewable energy investment, ramping it up, verified by Energy Independent Vermont. And then we come to behaviors. So attitudinally, we're strong, we're winning, love it. Everyone's on our team. Behaviorally, blue is bad here. Estimated percentage of adults who discuss global warming, at least occasionally. Different parts of Vermont shaded, but in the 30s and 40s. Let's look at other behaviors. Estimated percentage of adults who hear about global warming in the media at least once a week. Very low, 10%, 15%. I put 3 red arrows so you could see this. Look how bad this behavior is. How often do you discuss global warming? Rarely or never, 62%. So, attitudes, ding, 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 we're winning. Behaviors, boo, we're not. And in fact, any guesses behaviorally? Those of you who were in my workshop just an hour ago will know this. But these are the 3 where behaviors are in the teens in terms of 10%, 12%, 14% nationally. Contacting elected officials about climate change, contacting the media about climate change, and most importantly, changing their consumption, their habits, their purchasing. Why? Why do you think we've got such a big discrepancy between attitudes and behaviors?
Fear.
Fear, what else? Finances? Distraction?
Comfort.
Laziness.
Comfort.
Convenience.
People don't know what to do.
No sense of urgency.
Background.
This is great, all of it. Thank you. I would suggest that it's because problems are presented and problematized in the public in certain ways by people who have the power to do so. What do you think the most important problem in America is 2018 according to Gallup. Polling of America. Economy. Great. Unemployment, federal budget deficit, debt, wage issues, gap between rich and poor. Most important non-economic problems? Here we go. Satisfaction with government, poor leadership, immigration, illegal entry, unifying the country, race relations, racism, and healthcare. So where's climate on this? What is on this? And how could we appeal to this, since this is the public prioritization of problems in our country? How do we fashion our climate message within rubrics that people care about, either economic or non-economic? And how do we take a lesson from the public presentation of problems? Specifically, if you see something, if I took a backpack to New York subway, threw it in the middle and left it, what would happen? Somebody would say something. I said that in a different presentation and a woman said, I'd shoot it. Okay. Bad response. Please don't shoot it. But it is everywhere in our culture. We are immersed in the if you see something, say something, so much so that your behaviors have changed. I'm guessing, though you are all progressive, so you might approach it differently. I don't know how you approach it. But if there would be an announcement that there would be some kind of incident here, maybe the right wing came to attack this progressive meetup. If there would be something like, everyone please, I'm trying to do like the intercom, everyone please, I'm intentionally distorting my voice in case you were like, you can't hear it. You would probably behave quite quickly because this public presentation of a problem has pervaded our psyche, so much so that we're willing to act on this. And I've put Claire Danes up here because it has also pervaded Hollywood in terms of scaring us into thinking that terrorism is something that might happen to you when in fact your risk of being a victim to some kind of terrorist incident is quite low. So how do we problematize climate? Taking a lesson from terrorism problematization. And how do we change behavior? Oh, the formatting is a little weird on it. But I want us to think about three fronts when we want to change behavior. You think it's easy for adults to change behavior? No. I would challenge you on that one. He's the only person I heard say yes. I would like you to think about, like, when's the last time you changed behavior radically? Because that's what we're asking people to do. And it's tough. You need to be motivated, you have to have the ability, and then there needs to be a trigger. So, most people are motivated out of some mix of this, but to the previous workshop that I led, and some of what we've already discussed in terms of top problems prioritized by the American public, what are people motivated by? Money, what else? Happiness, health, security? Yes. And in fact, those first three, economics, health, and security, are what motivate most people. And we can tap into that. Now the ability comes into the rebates, and can I get a cold climate heat pump, and can I put solar panels because I get a 30% federal tax credit? That's all ability. Now it's on us to create a trigger, and that's what today's conversation is about, triggers. Let's say they've got the motivation, and we've framed up the narrative and frames and messages to appeal to that motivation. We've talked about problems that are prioritized in the American public, so we generally know where people are tracking attitudinally. We've got to give them the ability. That's not my work, that's Efficiency Vermont's work, and that's a whole bunch of other sponsors who are here in the room, that's their work. So it's easy to do, and now in this trigger space, we're the facilitator, or I see myself as a facilitator. Obviously some of you are policy wonks, you're technical, I'm not, but my work is in the trigger space. I've been thinking about how people change behaviors, and I've distilled it down to three fronts. People will change behavior when they have a near-death experience. I've had that. I rolled my car when I was 16, and in one of those, the Amish roads have big ditches because their wheels create these big ditches, and if you're not used to your tire going into that ditch and getting out of it, which I wasn't, I just learned how to drive, as a result, ended up flipping my cars, rolling in the field. Walked. Amazingly, my car was totaled. I have like a new lease on life. A couple years later, I have 2 heart surgeries. Made it through both. My father died of heart failure. New lease on life. And you bet every moment after that was like super potent. You know, like, I just want to go around and like tell everyone, do you realize like You may not know what tomorrow brings. Like, seize this moment. So near death will give that to people. It'll give them like a new lease on life. They'll change behavior as a result. Bill Clinton went vegan after he had his heart problems. We can't create this for people. This isn't our work. As much as I'd like for it to be, it's not real. Another form of behavior change is in your social network. Let's say you're a parent and you're discriminatory or prejudiced towards LGBTQIA PK communities, and suddenly your son or daughter comes out as or wants to be trans and pursues that, and as a parent you're like, oh, I really love my kid, and this is challenging all notions, and I've got all this cognitive dissonance, what do I do? And as a result, you change your behavior and you change your thinking. Again, we can't really impact this, but we can slowly but surely in our social networks, but some of this is pretty organic. This is what we need to do. This is the trigger space, and it's deep immersion. Taking a lesson from the terrorism messaging that has immersed you in it for the last decade plus. How do we take that lesson and create marketing campaigns for the public that immerse them constantly? I feel that every moment is a messaging moment, and if you fail to seize it, you're doing a disservice to your own work as a messenger and the movement generally. So I love seeing, for example, when you walked into Lake Maury Resort at the desk, they had something about this being a green hotel. I would love to see that message at every opportunity, because we do that with terrorism. We message at every opportunity. So, in your work, how are we seizing moments to message with the toilet paper? When the UN did World Toilet Day, the toilet paper had a message on it. So as you were using the toilet paper, you got the message about the fact that it was World Toilet Day. We should be doing this with everything. We do it already with terrorism, why don't we do it with climate? And to see ourselves as influencers, so that, because I want you to see yourself as an influencer. Maybe you've not called yourself an influencer, but you don't think of yourself an influencer, but you are an influencer, and how do you market your message 24/7, 365? Individuals on social media are more likely to share certain types of content. News, number one, so breaking news, humor, opinion, how-tos, warnings, fiction. Where do we in the climate space tend to track with these pillars? What do we disseminate? Warnings, yeah, we do lots of warnings. Warning, warning, warnings. We also do a lot of how-tos. Do we use much of this? What's keeping us from using that? It's not. It is not a laughing matter. Are we willing to possibly engage this space for the sake of reaching more people? I would love to be in the marketing room, the marketing team at Geico, when they were like, okay, we're thinking of a big switch where we actually don't spend 30 seconds on selling our wares. We spend 25 seconds, on something radically different. We're just gonna tell a fun story. We're gonna entertain people, and then the last 5 seconds we'll sell our insurance. Imagine if the climate community did something similar where we spend 25 seconds of every 30-second spot, speaking figuratively, in entertainment. The previous group already saw this, but these are top emotional, I'm reading them out because some of you in the back may not be able to read it. Top emotional responses to viral images. First three, happiness, surprise, admiration. What we tend to use as a climate community doesn't even track in the top 10 here. Because what do we tend to use? Facts and fear. People aren't moved by facts. Now, I am not saying that we shouldn't use fear occasionally. Fear can be productively used in small amounts. Just like marijuana. No, I'm just kidding. I don't smoke. It's just not recommended. Oh, that's true. It is legal. I can grow plants, yeah. So I'm actually a proponent of some discretionary fear-based framing, provided it doesn't overwhelm. My mom gets almost paralyzed by it. Turns inward. She doesn't know what to do. That's where a lot of people are right now, because the data are pretty fear-inducing. So we have to pull our own selves out of that space, because it's easy to get trapped in it, and be willing to entertain happiness, surprise, admiration, etc. Another quick thing, and I'm not expecting folks to remember some of this stuff. I'm just trying to seed a conversation to move us into marketing mode, behavior change communications mode, and ultimately campaign mode, which I'll get to in a second. But in all of our work, if we don't know who our audience is, how we're going to establish and continue a relationship with them, the service we're providing them, the ask we have of them, how we're going to outreach to them, and how we're going to continue the conversation. We haven't done our homework. So every time you've got a public engagement exercise, tick through these 6, and these will be available to you later if you find them useful. Maybe not. Maybe this language, maybe this framework isn't useful to you. That's fine. There are other marketing frameworks. But I find them helpful. Who's our audience? How are we going to establish a relationship with them? What's our service that we're providing? What value? Economic, health, security, fill in the blank. What's our call to action? After we've offered the service. Oftentimes we go straight to the call to action. Like, hey, call your senator, call your House of Representatives, whatever, fill in the blank. Without saying, hey, there's a real service that we're providing to you, and then we've got this ask. Don't flip these, because it's going to be much harder for someone to actually make the call if they don't know the service that's being provided. And then the outreach, and then follow up. We often make an ask and then we're like, oh, well, they didn't respond, so screw them, I'm out. But we have to continue to follow up. Okay, so campaign mindset. I want us to all think that we are, so I'm touching on a few things here: behavior change, communications, marketing, and now campaigning. I want us to imagine all of us in this room are political candidates, and we are running a campaign, in this case, to save our lives, to save the country, to save the state, to save the world. And let's mirror some of what campaigns do effectively. This is WWF. Don't buy exotic animal souvenirs. If you can't tell, blood is coming out of her suitcase. Pretty powerful. Surprise here in terms of emotions that track on viral images. This is the Maldives. Their ministers had a press conference underwater to show how the Maldives will be underwater in 50 years. This was pre-Copenhagen in 2009. NRDC, smokestack becomes a gun, killing us. This is what I'm talking about. Every moment is a messaging moment. This is WWF. They've got some of the greatest marketers around. I love their work. I could just spend the whole day talking about their work. If you can't tell, we're slowly deforesting the Amazon. IKEA, to its credit, at the Paris Climate Agreement, who was in Paris for the climate agreement climate process? I was there for work. And what they did do effectively is they took their work to the streets, the Champs-Élysées, where they had these engagement opportunities with the public. You could be a hamster and power this, but then they talk to you about renewable energy. And what is renewable energy? It keeps renewing itself. They were the only company, again, to their credit, I'm not like a huge IKEA fan because of the waste, but to their credit, and they've done some good investing in renewables, they took it to the streets. And that's what we have to do. We don't have time to not engage the public. So I'm going to tick through very quickly a bunch of M's. I like M's. My name's Michael. So I'm going to tick through a bunch of M's, starting with messages. And I thought it might be nice to wrap it up as a gift since we're headed into holiday season. So the red and green is for that. These are the messages I want us to use. Now this may seem cheap, it may seem superficial, it may seem like a poor understanding of humanity or a poor understanding of basic human needs to not include meaning, but I'd say most people are motivated by money, health, security, or ego. And if we fail to use these frames in our messaging, we fail to connect with the public. Now, I will be contested, yeah.
Could you just explain what an example of health and security would be for people? I think I know what security is, but for health, are you talking about they're fearful of getting ill or having
Well, health, as an example, international energy agencies report that 6.5 million people around the world die every year from air pollution. And that trickles down to like 200 Vermonters. I think MIT did a study, I'm quoting somebody in this room, VNRC or something, where several hundred Vermonters die every year from air pollution. So health would be that frame. Security was the other one you wanted?
Yeah, I think I've got that one. I'm going to
Okay,
national security.
grid goes, well, and even, well, national security, but even more localized in Brandon, when the grid goes down, I have energy security because I have Tesla Powerwall batteries, solar panels, yeah. Yeah, thank you, if you have questions as I go through. I am contested by my climate comrades because they tend to appeal to the moral, the higher moral ground, the moral responsibility, the environmental ethic. I wish we had time for that. And yes, I think it appeals to some people, but universally, consistently, I see these appealing to the most people. So am I gonna use them? Yes. Am I gonna use them cheaply? No. Am I gonna use them respectfully? Yes. Our climate community will use these in token form, and it can appear disingenuous. Don't do that. Own these frames. If you choose to use them, own them, know what you're talking about, and know your data. Because if you don't know your data and you talk about like green jobs, and then someone presses you on how many green jobs, and you're like, well, lots of them. Like 10,000, I don't know, thousands, and lots of green jobs. We will get dismissed from the conversation. So I'm not saying you do, but if you do any of these messages, use any of these messages, make sure you use them respectfully in a committed fashion with good data. So PNRC, apologies, but I pulled from your site some images that we can work with. Hopefully that's okay. I know I didn't check with you. But for example, when you click on VNRC's programs, and I'm guessing this is the case with a lot of organizations, how are we making sure that your programs are appealing to this? If our programs are this, and again, the layout's tough. Joey, just give me a look. You get me a look. Over here it says energy and climate action, forests and wildlife, sustainable communities and water. I might not, as a user, continue on. Because I come to this page, oh, what are your programs? And I am not enticed, I'm not invited into a further conversation simply because maybe I don't track with this. I'm only raising this because we have a small window with some people. They engage for a second, and if we don't hook them quick, we've lost them. Messengers. So how do we get these folks as surrogates? The economists, the health practitioners, the doctors. Lancet Journal came out with this powerful report in the last week saying that we're all gonna die. How do we get these surrogates in Vermont speaking on our behalf? And how do we make sure that they're not all old white men doing it too? I was disappointed in the Global Climate Action Summit, which I went to in San Francisco, that again, we're seeing the same faces over and over again. Jane Goodall, thankfully, got a lot of traction for her appearance. She talked about plant-based diets at GCAS, thankfully. But wasn't a whole lot of diversity on the main stage. Needs to be more diversity. You had your hand up?
Yeah, I was going to ask what the last one, ego and id.
Yeah. All of ego and id can encompass things like lifestyle and convenience and what you think about yourself and the pride I get from having a green life. You know, like in my work, I better walk the talk. If I'm not walking the talk, I'm not a very good messenger. And so, do I get some ego satisfaction out of that? Absolutely. And so, ego also encompasses like the fact that my neighbor loves driving or wants to drive my Leaf because of the acceleration and the torque and the power. That's real. So, and I'm being quite serious. Mainstream majority. These are Hillary Clinton's most common words in the first presidential debate. And these are Donald Trump's most common words in the first presidential debate. How many multi-syllabic words do you see in here or here? Very few. And we're in the deep decarbonization, anthropogenic, negative externalities, carbon neutrality, net zero space. We have to think like a candidate thinks and speak like a candidate speaks because we need to be in campaign mode. Mass media. This is me on Fox News years ago. I don't know what I was talking about, some foreign policy issue, I think. We have to be willing to go where people are in the media space. There's a reason why Donald Trump wrote for USA Today. I prefer writing for USA Today over New York Times. New York Times will give me follow-up interviews. Like when I write for the New York Times, NPR will call and be like, we want to interview you about this issue. I think it was around guns. But when I write for USA Today, I know I'm reaching the mass middle, and that's the community I want to reach. I don't need to reach the elites. Me. It's another M that's pretty critical. This is Emma Watson wearing a dress that was made of...
Me.
No. Yeah, no, it wasn't made of meat. It wasn't made of duct tape. It was made of trash. She's a big surrogate for sustainable fashion. And so she used this opportunity to walk the talk, literally. I just want to give a quick example, because I was really I get pretty disappointed with the climate community when they miss opportunities. One great opportunity to walk the talk and to message the me was when Al Gore did his second film. Who saw it? So I was on a panel right afterwards with his daughter. It was a screening, and I saw the film and I was like, oh, what a disappointment. Because he failed to use the opportunity to talk about his own personal struggle. It was all about like calling elites calling elites. It was like he called Elon Musk and they called the energy minister in India and they got a deal for Paris and go team. But it wasn't like Al Gore sitting down at a table and being like, oh, I'm about to eat a burger and the burger's carbon impact is huge and I'm gonna have this awareness on film where I have an aha moment and I switch to more plant-based diets on film so that people see it and are impacted by it. His whole thing was hashtag be inconvenient, which you brought up at the end. I'm like, come on, Al Gore. There's nothing inconvenient about you calling Elon Musk or the energy minister of India. What would be inconvenient is if you took the time to switch your personal choices to something more sustainable. And maybe he is, I don't know, but I just wanted to see it. Like, walk us through that, talk us through that, what he's wearing, what he's eating, where he's flying, etc. Let us into that space and how inconvenient it may be for you so that we can then use my choice, my voice, my vote. Means, if you haven't memified it, you haven't done your work. And for those of you in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, this is an example of a meme. And why I think this is a requirement in terms of memifying everything is that that's where so many people are talking, and that's the only space they're talking in. There are generations now that only spend their time in that space, and so if you haven't created a meme now, you haven't transmogrified it, using an old Peter Paul and Mary from one of their songs. I mean, they didn't invent the word clearly, but transmogrify. So how are you translating your work so that it rolls in this space seamlessly? Moments. Miley Cyrus, Neil Young, Gerard Butler, among those to lose homes in California wildfires. Any guess on what really disappointed me with this moment? So a friend of mine was hosting a fundraiser with Gerard Butler, and I was like, please, 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 have Gerard talk about the climate impacts and how they're affecting the fires. He didn't, nor did Kim Kardashian, nor did Alyssa Milano, whose homes were also impacted. But what a missed moment. We have to seize these moments to message on climate because that's where the world is watching. My cities have not done a great job of this. I work for the Carbon Neutral Cities Alliance, which is a global consortium of really ambitious cities. Australia has had numerous bushfires. I've trained Sydney and Melbourne. When those fires happen, I'm like, this is your moment, the world is watching, message. I'll get you an op-ed and wherever, let's do a major press event. And they don't. And it's like, if we're not maximizing on these moments, same in Vermont, when something comes up, if we're not ready to go, because you know a political candidate would be ready to go. If there's a terrorism incident, you bet Trump and Clinton were there on the scene in the campaign to message that moment. We have to do the same. When there is a moment, we have to be ready to message on it, just like a campaign would, just like a candidate would. Movement, momentum, another M. People want to be a part of a movement. So, how do we let them know, again, apologies VNRC, take action. I could have picked a bunch, not just VNRC. I just chose VNRC since they're the hosts, and they asked me to be here. And I'm new enough to Vermont, it's not like I'm severing relations because I'm still new to like building them, so maybe I'm pretty actively, but it's out of love. Awesome. So, when you ask someone to take an action, you better reflect it back up on screen, whatever that screen is, literal or figurative, so that they know they're a part of a movement. People don't want to take action, especially around climate, in a siloed fashion because they feel ineffective in doing so, or incompetent in doing so, or impotent in doing so. So how do we reflect back? There are plenty of apps out there. This is just one, Joulebug, that helps you see what other communities are doing, so you get some reflection back that you're part of a movement. This is just a formulaic that Hannah Albert, I don't think she actually exists, but it's just an example of an app. There are plenty of apps out there. You can do that even just with a simple website, featuring photos, profiling people, video. This is cool person X, this is cool person Y, this is cool person Z. Look at all the awesome stuff they're doing to green their home, make their home more efficient, etc. Multiples. Repeat, 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 repeat. So if you're doing a television interview, if you've got an elevator conversation, if you've just got 5 minutes with someone, it's better for you to repeat one thing 5 to 7 times than saying 5 to 7 things one time. That's going to be really hard for us because we're like, well, climate change is nuanced, we've got all these things to say, and there's all these important things we need to say. But repeating in multiples is going to leave a stronger impression. Meetups, this is just for any of you who want to get involved with the press. Have a relationship with them. I used to work in Congress for a congressman named Mike Honda. Anyone know him? He grew up in the internment camps because we thought Japanese Americans were evil and terrorists, so we put him in internment camps. He grew up in one, became a member of Congress, represented Silicon Valley. Great guy, everyone loved him, not a great speaker. And so what I would do to get him press was what?
Warm up.
Well, definitely warm up. Now, I realized early I couldn't fix that. So what did I do instead as his communication director? What's that? That's right. Press in DC loved me because I would go out to lunch with them and have coffee with them and give them fun creative scoops, and the relationship was built beforehand so that when I wanted something from them, like a story featuring Mike Honda, I would get it. Because the press loved me, and then consistently I would get emails from press being like, oh, it's so fun working with you, because most people have antagonistic relationships with press. And I'm guessing some of you could identify some Vermont examples where it's antagonistic. Maybe it's not, maybe it's just all positive. But if it is antagonistic, you Aikido that crap. Like, embrace them, love on them, build a relationship, and transform that energy. And I'd love to be in conversation with any of you who are working to do that, because I want to be a part of that, and I think it can be done. I just love skin paintings. Magic. Little serious moment here. This is Amnesty International, giving you the impression as you walk down the sidewalk that you're seeing Gitmo detainees. They've done such a brilliant job matching up their ads with the actual space, so that it is an optical illusion. I've already mentioned Geico. How do we work magic into our campaigning to do a little bit of magic, a little bit of entertainment, so that we trick them into following us? We trick them into watching us. We trick them into listening to us. That's what Geico does. I'm going to trick you into an entertaining experience so I capture your attention for 25 seconds, and then just in the last, oh yeah, hey, buy our insurance. Same with climate. How can we give them an entertaining experience, and then at the very end be like, oh yeah, hey, yeah, change your light bulb, done. And then we're out. Mimicry, please, 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 please. Yeah, it's a pretty great picture. Never ask someone to do something that you haven't done yourself. Please. This happens a lot in the climate space. I can't tell you how many environmentalists I know who ask something of the public and they haven't done them themselves. Nor have they gone further and actually, they're not switching to plant-based diets, they're not making the decisions they need to make, but they've asked people to do something or said this is allowed or this is permissible, we should promote this, but they haven't done it themselves. Do it yourself first before you ever, ever, ever ask anyone else to do it. Yes?
How is that different from me?
It's not. What am I doing? Yes, repetition. These M's aren't all different. There is repetition.
Okay.
I feel pretty strongly about this one, so I'm just bringing it in different ways. Mirroring, which is not that different from movement building. This is a service provided by, oops. So this is a service provided by this group. Oh, I need to point that way. Community Climate Solutions. They provide this software which helps you mirror back to your community the actions taken. What's great about this page? Why would someone like my mom like this page? It's hopeful, yes. And what else?
Large print.
Yeah, simple numbers. And then after I fill this out, I know that I'm part of this community. There's a movement building. These are the actions that are being taken. It is hopeful. So if you want it, go to them. And again, VNRC. Just a reminder. So I looked at the Vermont Conservation Voters' Twitter and found the most retweeted or liked tweets. Why do you think, Mindful VM I just mentioned, why do you think this tweet got more activity?
Would you read it?
Yep. I will read it. You can't have a successful business on a dying planet, says Dan Barlow of VBSR. Lawmakers need to act now. Hashtag what's the plan? Question mark. Hashtag Action on Climate Vermont. Hashtag PT Poly. But the photo's it. We're engaging with him And yes, there's a conversation, the question's asked, it looks like we're quoting from the conversation. This one also tracked well, and I assume these people were tagged in photos. If not, they should have been.
They didn't have
All
Twitter.
of these people should have been tagged in the photo. But this is the stuff that tracks because people want to see themselves up on social media. Remarkably, the ego attraction is still there, so let's exploit it for at least the next 10 years until people realize, oh, it's really easy actually to be featured and profiled. The selfieization of social media is still a thing, so how do we exploit it so that we're putting people's picture up and applauding them for the positive work they're doing around climate? We need to do so much work on that front. So just a reminder on the M's. These are it. This will be sent to you if you want it, or downloadable. And just a final reminder to avoid this. I know I upset some people probably in this room because I am pretty anti-net zero and anti-carbon neutrality and anti-decarbonization. Why? Nobody knows what it means. Hard to build a movement around it. You know, like imagine rallying in the streets, like, what do we want? Net zero. What do we want? You know, what do we want? Decarbonization. And so, if you're having a hard time, just look at how this is communicated. Well, if you take the heating, the lighting, the cooling, the equipment, the pumps, fans, the hot water, divided by the gross building area equals the UEI, the BTUs, minus the renewables, then you get net zero energy. It's just really hard to communicate. Another example of the difficulty around communication. These are my cities too, that I work with, and I'm constantly encouraging them to not use this language, and they continue to default to it, so they're clearly not doing my job very well. Any guesses as to the avoiding confusion that I'm trying to highlight here? What's happening with Boston that I don't like?
Carbon isn't everything.
Carbon isn't everything, so the city wouldn't exist if we had a truly carbon-free Boston. Thank you. And they're mixing concepts. Wait, do we want a carbon-free Boston or a carbon-neutral Boston? So again, this is the first interface a user might have with the city of Boston's carbon work or climate work. And if they're immediately confused, we've lost them. And why I'm so vehement about it, why I care so about it, it's like, we have a small window with most of the people out there. And if we abuse this moment, we've lost an opportunity. Be clear, I like 100%. 100% is nice. 100% renewable electricity, 100% renewable heating, 100% renewable transportation. I like 0. 0 is clear. So zeros and 100s I like. 90 by 50, 80 by 50, 40 by 30, 70 by 70. I'm just making stuff up. I don't know. So just as a reminder, let's be very vigilant about providing triggers for people. Non-violent triggers. I like triggers. Making sure we've got the motivation, which again is what? What are the top 3 motivators? Economics, health, security, and ego, thankfully. Mention that, and then let's make sure we have the ability teed up and ready to go. Again, that's not my work. Those are all the service agencies here in this room and in the state of Vermont, so that it's easy to do. And then our work as facilitators to provide a trigger. There are many ways we can do that. If you only take one thing out of this slide here, let it be the, what do you think I bias towards? Service. What's the value proposition? What's the economic value proposition? What's the health value proposition? What's the security value proposition? And again, have good data, be respectful about your use of it, don't use it in token form, and be serious about it, otherwise we will be called to question and we won't be believed. And lastly, just some M's to remember. I would love to be in conversation with you as you build out your campaigns. Hopefully you go away from this thinking that, okay, well I could be in campaign mode a little more often than I am. I am encouraging a vigilance that may feel exhausting, but it won't be if we're in conversation, creative conversation with each other. I love my work. It's fun, it's creative, we're always coming up with new ideas. So this should be fun work, even though, mindful of data, we're all gonna die. Let's have a good time doing it before we go. Thank you so much, Rita.
have time for a few questions, maybe just a couple, depending on how it goes. Does anyone have any questions? Thoughts, comments? People exhausted? Here we go. Hang on. Coming back here.
That's gonna be me.
I'm totally overwhelmed.
Here we go.
Could you model for us a 30-second climate change elevator speech?
Dang.
Yeah. Yeah, and it goes like this. It goes like this. Knock, knock. No, it wasn't a knock, knock. It was a text. It was a text. Hey, Michael. I see you've got power. Yeah, I got power. Our road had an outage. We have so many outages. No, what I'm about to say didn't happen on this Tuesday, even though it could have led to this. I'm going to answer your question in a where are you? Oh, back there. Yeah, in a slightly different way. I would be happy to be in conversation with you about modeling messaging for something that's tailored to your needs. I don't know where you work or what, I don't know if you're in an energy committee somewhere in the state of Vermont, but I'd be very keen to do it. But I am using this opportunity to talk about an anecdote where I actually don't talk climate, but I get my neighbors to think about behavior change, because that's ultimately the goal. Do I need my neighbors to talk with me about climate data? No. Do I want my neighbors to make behavior change that is going to avert and avoid catastrophic climate change? Yes. So when I had power, because I have Tesla Powerwall batteries, and I have solar, and I have heat pumps, when I had power on, because we were on the road, my neighbor came over for a shower because they wanted, he works construction, came over for a shower. That got us into conversation. So he's coming out of my bathroom, and he's like, so how do you, this isn't gonna get weird. He's coming out of my bathroom, and he's like, how do you have power? And is it because of the solar? No, it's not. It's because I have batteries. What are the batteries? I didn't buy the batteries, I leased them for $15 a month, which is palatable to the public on my road. Like $15 a month, we can do this. They don't like their dirty generators. They're loud. They're apologetic to me when I hear their generators. And so they're unhealthy generators. Again, thinking about health, economics, and security. I've got energy security because the grid is down, I've still got power. That's appealing to them. We can get to a conversation about behavior change that they might switch to, and indeed, they called up Green Mountain Power, they're gonna get the batteries too. So they're changing behavior, we're not even talking about the National Climate Assessment. So that's important to me. I care about that. Do I need to have a conversation about the fact that we've got 12 years to fix it? No.
Okay, so the way you're talking here, that's how I was talking in 1985 to 1990, when we were just finding this stuff out. We were collecting the data, the scientists were engaged. This was so interesting, what's going on our planet, and then we connected it to humanity. 1990, I was in Bergen, Norway when it started, first IPCC meeting. The policy people and the politicians came at the scientists like we just landed with an antennae. And all of this turned from knowledge and information to fear. It was like we just opened Pandora's box of hell. So when it became public, the first big pitfall was a chasm opened in really bad communication. And the scientists who were trying to express clarity were told, no. So what happened was knowledge got separated from communication. Communication was distorted, and that distorted communication is what became the information that was publicized. Now we've got to circle back 40 years, and try to explain what we saw. That's the hard problem. The humor part is working. However, going forward, how does your positive language confront the Koch brothers? They have, when you get your funding cut 2016, I haven't done science in 2 years. They just pull the money plugs. I'd like you to address the issue of pulling the money plugs to do research, to get the information out, to get the facts out. Because that is the gate that is stopping.
Okay, can I respond? So because you brought up a couple points. So this isn't a conference about campaign finance reform or Citizens United, and obviously that has bearing on your point about Koch brothers. Short of us being Koch brothers and sisters.
For climate science.
No, I know. I'm getting to your point. short of us being Koch brothers where we can influence think tanks in DC at the level that they are, what do we do instead? And why I keep impressing upon any group I can talk to around the importance of using the public spaces available to us, which are media, because they're free, is how do we be super creative with our use of it? And by media, I'm speaking of everything from the public piazza to social media to me going from point A to point B, and I have a quick moment to message, so I'm going to message it and I'm going to send it out to someone because I have to constantly be doing that because I feel the urgency, so I have to constantly message. Part of the reason why in the previous workshop, for those of you who are here, I talked about some of the creative ploys we did with my previous boss, Congressman Mike Honda, is that there's a lot that we can do to fight back creatively short of money. And that's why I keep coming back to campaign mode. Because campaigners, and we've seen some of them in the last election where they didn't have a whole lot of money, but got national attention. You can get national attention. Media is power and I want us to use it effectively. So who am I? I grew up largely without a father. I grew up pretty poor, didn't go to a Ivy League school, didn't go to Harvard, didn't go to Yale, didn't go to Princeton, etc. I arrived in DC and I'm like, how do I get power? How do I be a political pundit? And how did I get power? Having no name, no Ivy League education, and really no standing in the city. Any guesses on how I got power as a political pundit?
You're white and you're male.
Yes, you're absolutely right. No, I totally agree.
Female scientists, I can tell you.
I totally agree. I am 100% with you on that, no question. In terms of my privilege, the fact that I have a big head, people tend to vote for big heads. Yeah, tall white male, no question. And, which is why I've spent my life pounding this pavement, I started writing op-eds. And I started writing op-eds from places where I was the only white male, like Mogadishu and Sana'a in Yemen and Karachi in Pakistan and Kabul in Afghanistan. So thinking about the kind of work we can do, and if you are privileged and capturing all the characteristics you've identified that has afforded privilege, how do we use that privilege best? How do we either make space, step out of the way for other people, or how do we work with them to get their voice out in the media and the space too? So I built a punditry that allowed me to comment on the Fox Newses and the CNNs because I kept writing and writing and writing and writing and writing around expertise that I had. All of you have different expertise, so how do you write? So that when production assistant from Fox News or CNN was looking for an expert on Somalia, they found me, or whatever issue, they found me in the web, and that's what I want for us, so that we're turned to, because you bet the deniers and the skeptics and the Koch-funded thinkers are going to be seizing that spot if we don't seize it ourselves. So I do think we can counteract it. It takes a lot of work and a lot of time, but that's why I keep coming back to the free power that's available to us to push back. Other questions?
We are running out of time. So I just want to have you give us a quiz before I wrap it up on the 4 frames that we need to embrace.
4 messaging frames? Yeah, well I think I keep repeating them, so I think they're deeply ingrained, which is good. 4 frames? Economics, money, health, security, and awesome. Thank you so much.
And give Michael a big